DeepSeek is suddenly getting super hot in 2025.
In general, it's been positive. More companies were willing to take a stab into generative AI.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wit, which is what I think. We're joined by Pak Ting and Jackie Chan of Voti AI. I'm excited to talk to them about their voice recognition software and all about artificial intelligence. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to put links below about who they are. So welcome, Pak and Jackie.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all.
Let's start off with each of you defining what your opinion of what artificial intelligence is.
Maybe I'll quickly start off first. I think it's pretty simple. It's non-human intelligence, anything that's artificial. And I think that's been defined now by a lot of the features that's been out there, be it speech recognition or generation of videos or generation of content. That to me is the definition of AI.
Okay, so maybe my turn. I'm not going to go through all the academic definition, the history thing. I'm just talking my point of view, right? So I'm thinking what artificial intelligence means is that we are trying to recreate intelligence while we don't know what intelligence is actually. We don't know the underlying mechanism, but when we talk to maybe animals or human beings, we know that, oh, this guy is intelligent, right? So this is a pursuit understanding what intelligence means. I actually also want to add in my wife's definition of AI is to help her to handle chores. The houseworks because she knows we all do the AI thing is super hot, but then it's all doing the white collar works, right? Why is not helping her?
Yeah, well, hey, if it can do my laundry, which I'm terrible at, then, the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
But certainly what a wife does too, like be your sounding board, bounce ideas. Every great entrepreneur has a good partner behind them. Actually, the two of you, how did you guys meet? How did this match made in Silicon, Hong Kong happen? It was in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, we met in Hong Kong. Actually, I just quit banking, and then I met Jackie at a hackathon. This is in Hong Kong Island. At that time, this was 2012, 2013, I think, and there wasn't a lot of founders per se. So I met him through actually a friend, a friend, and then at a hackathon. So that's where we met.
I have a couple other friends that they're like serial hackathoners where they go from country to country and they just compete. But maybe you could define for most people who don't know what hackathons are and what they really are. I assume you're not breaking into NASA or the FBI. What happens at a hackathon?
So hackathon actually is a combination of two words. One is hacking, like a hacker, and another is marathon. So we hack something in a period of time. So by that time, it's super hot in Hong Kong and actually globally. We talk about startup weekend. We talk about entrepreneurship. Everybody should do the startup thing, right? And then it's like a marathon. We start from Friday night till Sunday night. We will form teams and then we will pitch different ideas. We'll do the validation. Validation is super important. It's not like I want to build like a UFO and then everybody, yeah, we should do that. We need to make sure this is what really people want, being very realistic. And then we also need to hack something out within a weekend. So somebody may also say that hackathon is just like a weekend project, which is kind of true. We could be usually occupied by daily works. And so we need to spare some time, like my people with different tech skills, and then we try something new.
Oh, cool. So it's kind of like in film, we have these 48-hour, 64-hour, 72-hour filmings. They're given a theme and they make a movie in that short period of time and they compete. Right. Okay. I actually understand what a hackathon. I just thought maybe you guys are just, okay, you go here and, it's very secret operative type thing, but it really has an entrepreneurial spirit to it. I'm really interested in, I think what you guys are doing is amazing. The speech recognition and, maybe one day we'll have that universal translator on Star Trek. Look, I got something here, like that, How did you guys from there get together and be like, hey, I want to do something in this category? And then we have to tackle you guys dealing with Cantonese, which is one of the hardest languages to comprehend.
Maybe I'll speed up sort of like the early years. When Jackie and I have met, we set up Bodhi, and that was more to kind of tackle big data. and big data being in Hong Kong, a lot of it was Cantonese. Fast forward all the way past 10 years, GPT obviously was a big thing. So we were approached by one of the global tech firms, Amazon, to build the first Hong Kong Cantonese large language model. This was 2 years ago, 2023. So that was sort of a flagship product last year. And so with that, then obviously with advancements in AI, then speech became a big thing, not just text, but speech and so on and so forth. So I guess the short of it as to how we kind of evolved from big data all the way to, where we are today, which is to focus on neglected languages, languages that aren't, we call low resource, and turn that into something that's usable, like large language models, speech recognition, and so on and so forth.
And Jackie?
I'll put it in another angle. I would say, yes, first we do actually big data and doing market research and social listening is super hot, right? Throughout these years, I found that the relationship between data and AI is super close. Why? It's because when we have lots of data, actually we don't have enough manpower to do the checking annotation thing. And so we started to need to use AI to involve and help, right? Nowadays, ChatGPT is super hot, generative AI thing. Actually, if you need such a versatile general purpose AI, you need lots of data. So it is like a zigzag. You need data and then you need to analyze the data. So you need AI and then you need to build a better AI and then you need more data. So I think this is what makes up with this track from big data and then to AI and then to Cantonese low resource language thing and then build the LM again. Yeah, it's the zigzag way.
Yeah, I guess it's been a process and learning. Why'd you initially call it Voti AI? I'm sure people will have a question about that.
Good question.
The name was formed in Canada, actually, with a bunch of creatives. My brother's a creative, and him and his partner came up with the name. And the reason was because we were trying to figure out what people think, big data and so on and so forth. So at that time, Google was a good thing. And so we said, hey, why don't we say Voti? So vote with a double E. So it's almost like, hey, do you guys want to go into a boardroom and say, let's do a Voti? And that was sort of the thinking behind that. And that just became a name. And obviously the website was available. At that time, 5-letter websites, domains were also quite expensive, and Voti wasn't that expensive. So we also chose that as well. Part of our consideration.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, it's interesting that you guys say that Cantonese is a low-resourced language. I mean, what, in Hong Kong, Shenzhen alone, maybe across Southeast Asia, maybe 100 million people? It's just not getting the attention it deserves in this space. Is that right?
Well, actually, low resource language is an academic term, which means that it's not enough data for computation. So when we look for Cantonese data from the internet, we have few. And one of the reasons is that actually Cantonese is a verbal language. It's a dialect. And so it's not just like English or let's say in Chinese, if we speak in Mandarin, the verbal language and the written language is actually the same. Right. But for Cantonese, it's not. And so there is not enough data. While this is a low resource language, it doesn't mean that there are not enough users. Actually, there are lots of Cantonese speakers, not to just mention Hong Kong, Macau, or Guangdong province. Even in Southeast Asia, in Chinatowns, in overseas, right? By statistics, there are over 86 million people speaking in Cantonese. And so it's a low resource language. We don't have enough data, but there are actually lots of people speaking Cantonese. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Would you call, probably sort of cultivate the WAQ, the overseas Chinese?
Definitely, yes. Like for languages, we can't just separate languages from cultures, right? So like for Cantonese, it's not just for Hong Kong or like for Guangdong province. It started from Guangzhou because it's Canton, and so it's called Cantonese, right? And so actually it captures lots of very diversified culture and also with lots of histories.
Awesome. And then let me mention that actually, and I just noticed, I don't know if this is recent, but on Google Translate, you can actually select Cantonese and it'll give you a colloquial conversational style language. Am I noticing that that's recent, or is that something that's just happened, it's been around for a year and I just didn't know? Or
I think it has been for years because we have lots of people who are passionate in Cantonese and actually they're working in Google. And so they're trying to push Cantonese to what we call the primary listed languages. Like for English, for simplified Chinese, or like could be for French, they're the primary one. But for Cantonese, because it's a dialect, it's usually in the second tier. So there are lots of like passionate Cantonese speakers. They're trying to work hard on the traditional NLP and right now to the Cantonese LM, and then they are trying to preserve this Cantonese language and also the culture.
I hope they're preserving the swear words too. Yeah, swearing is like a big, I mean, like all the fun slang we've heard in movies and stuff. Well, I want to tell everyone that, obviously that you guys aren't just doing translation, you're adding logical voices to not just robotic voices, but voices to the translation. But maybe you guys should tell me more about like what exactly is happening now with your developments.
If we talk about translation, it's actually super difficult. Like even for the United Nations, they have the conferences, meetings. Chinese is actually also one of their official language. But then in Chinese, we usually have some proverbs, which usually stuffed up from some Asian stories. So we usually have like four characters to describe something.
Yeah,
Like
like
if
idioms.
yeah, it's like idioms, but it's like a shorter form. Like let's say in Chinese, we say 守株待兔. What it means is that you are waiting under the tree for the rabbits to come. If I just translate like this, it doesn't know what it means, right? What's the lessons learned, right? But if we really need to do the translation, the lessons learned is that you can't wait for the opportunities. You need to like catch it. You need to seize it. You need to be proactive, right? So it's very difficult to translate. But like if any Chinese speaker, they say 守株待兔, and then if you need to do the translation, even for the professional translator, it's a headache to them because they need to say like, okay, here is the Chinese proverb. They have a story to tell, and they need to go through the whole Asian story, and then the lessons learned. For normal audience, it's like they just say like four characters, right? You can
Mm,
translate a
mm.
whole paragraph, a whole story, right?
Yeah, it's a much older language. It seems like Chinese have a saying for everything, like every situation, and English doesn't necessarily have that. So what is the approach? Is this the reasoning aspect of the AI for you?
I think like for every languages, they have their own culture, and so they have their own idioms, right? Like back to English, if you talk about raining cats and dogs, you understand that it means raining heavily, right? But if
Hmm.
we really translate it literally
Hmm.
to Chinese, 落緊貓同雨, like to
Yeah.
Chinese, what does it mean? Like we only have the rains, right?
Yeah, it's not a literal translation. So then what's the reasoning or approach that the artificial intelligence would take? Or maybe it's just brute force. I don't know. Like someone has to enter it in, like that's what it means.
Yeah, this is a very good question. Like, if we don't have generative AI, we can do what we call NLP, the natural language processing. We'll have lots of these kind of rules about for each languages, and then we also need to do lots of these kind of mapping. And sometimes because the culture is so unique, actually we can't translate it. We can only like use the original word. Like in Chinese cuisine, we have dim sum. You can't translate it.
Right, right,
And
right,
just
right.
say dim sum and siu mai, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like the
So
reverse, like in Cantonese, they use a lot of English in there. They just kind
yeah.
of everyone just sneaks it in, and that's fine too.
Yes, that's the unique culture in Hong Kong. We have loan words like taxi, we call it cab, right? Taxi in Cantonese, we call taxi, right? It's very similar to taxi. And then we also have lots of code switching. Like when we speak in Cantonese, it's not actually like purely in Cantonese, not in Chinese. We'll like switch from English and then Cantonese and it's English and then Cantonese. So we need to capture all these. And if we do it by traditional NLP, it will be super hard. So right now with generative AI, with large language model, not to mention about the true nature of LM, actually it's just a probabilistic next token prediction machine, right? It's just a program, but it can really do the understanding by just pure observation. And then we can also see that it can do translation better than what we have been doing. I actually see some people are trying to translate those Asian religious texts and then to the modernized, like could be Chinese, could be Cantonese, could be also in English. And
Hmm.
then actually it is translating better than ever. And so I can really understand those Asian regions tests. So this is something like I will say this is a historical moment. We haven't seen this before. Right now, we can do it in a better way. So it is very high quality.
Well, if it's not proprietary, like what are you training it on? I mean, is it like, would you even use like old Hong Kong movies or something?
I would like split this into two parts. One is like right now LM can help do better translation and also generating high quality data. And so that's why this is how like DeepSeek have those data to do the training. And so they can cut down the cost with a very powerful LM, right? So like for all LM training is iterative. Like the first version, it may not like doing properly, it may hallucinate, right? But then after these kind of iterations, you can get a better and better LM and then with a lower cost. So this one thing. The second issue is about the data issue. So what kind of data can we use for training? Usually we will talk about like there are copyright issues and so we can only use those publicly available on the internet and then to do this kind of training. But as I said, language and culture is not separable. Right. And if we need to like train about some kind of culture thing, we still need those copyrighted data. For example, in Cantonese, it's very common. We used to be having a very vibrant movie industry. Like we have Stephen Chow, lots of movies, but then those are copyright. Okay. We have Cantopop, okay, just like K-pop, just like J-pop, right? And then for all the lyrics, it's copyright. Okay. And then we could be having fictions in China. We have Jinrong, those martial arts Asian fiction, right? Those are copyright materials. So we can actually use them to do the training in a proper way. Okay.
Though, like a lot of the Mid-Journey stuff, who
Well,
knows where all that artwork comes from?
they all will have some kind of, I would say, gray area because they are still having like court cases. I'll just say copyright law outdated. How we can utilize this data, I'm not using the same format or the same form to redistribute. But then let's say if we really use all the data and then we can train the large language model and the large language model can like generate thousands of movies or lyrics, songs immediately. So how those creators can earn money. So that's the open problem globally. So right now, let's say when we do the Cantonese LM, actually we don't use copyright data because of these kind of legal issues. If we really need to use, like we actually talk to a radio station in Hong Kong, which is like PBS. In Hong Kong is RTHK. So they have both radio and television in Hong Kong. And so we have signed agreements so that they can transfer their copyrighted materials, could be radio program, could be TV program, so that we can utilize the data to train the LM. So I think that's more proper way to handle the copyrighted materials. And like for some, it's very difficult to talk. They could be culturally prevalent, but if they don't talk to us, then I have no ways to get those data. Right. Like right now in Hong Kong government is actually quite pro AI. So they are talking about like, we can actually use copyrighted materials to do this training. And then for content creators, if they don't agree, they can do an opt-out. So that's still in progress right now.
Well, I hope they do help you guys. I think it's a worthy cause. I mean, that's a good question for Pac. Like, why challenge yourself to head into like a business where, you know, you've taken on one of the toughest languages. And obviously it's not the billion people speaking it, it's 100 million people, which is still a lot of people. What was the kind of thought process behind that?
Well, thought process was, it's pretty simple. I think, you know, geographically we're in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong as a service center is highly disruptible with large language model. Hong Kong was something that was always, you know, kind of an easy one. Also doesn't invite a lot of people to come in because, as you mentioned, it's not a big place. It's not a billion people. So you have less competition. We have an edge. We're based in Hong Kong and, you know, we had the data. So I think the stars were in some sense kind of aligned. I think those were the reasons as we got more into it. You know, Jackie, like say, you know, there's let's just call it 100 million people speaking Cantonese. That means there's 6.9 billion people that want to potentially learn Cantonese. So the market is actually, it's as big as you want it to be. And then on the business side of things, you know, a lot of the big banks, big carriers, for example, have home bases in Hong Kong. And so because of the lack of attention to this, they don't really get served. So I think from all perspectives, Cantonese made sense to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just on the ground level, like Jackie's wife was saying, we use a lot of WhatsApp. And I saw like a mini demo from you where, it was translating English to Cantonese, which is great, especially when you spend an hour on, waiting for a call center or something like that to respond to you. Oh, at least a lot of things are resolved on WhatsApp nowadays too, which is amazing. And
Yeah.
that's some of the stuff that you guys are doing and seeing that like getting traction.
Yeah, I think WhatsApp is obviously widely used in Hong Kong. And so if you kind of look at sort of the yesteryears, the way to get to kind of, let's say, fix a certain thing at your bank account or book a ticket, all that is done through offline branch bookings and so on and so forth. Then came the call centers. But then you obviously have a bottleneck right there. So I think the way to kind of really scale out that solution is really through WhatsApp. You don't change people's behavior. People use it already. It's agentic, so you can actually use it and do stuff with it. I think that's going to be sort of the trend for this year.
Well, I mean, for people, let's say in the States who just use iMessage and probably never use WhatsApp, but I mean, WhatsApp is owned by Meta. There's always some sort of parent group or something like that too, and lots of communication on WhatsApp. Let's dive further into what your thoughts about what's going on with artificial intelligence. Like, how has it been being a company based in Hong Kong? What's that like? Are you traveling a lot? What's the landscape been like for you?
Obviously, there's been a lot of macro headwinds, and political winds are changing from time to time. What hasn't really changed is obviously the great superpowers. And I think that somewhat to us has affected us, being it procuring chips, being it for fundraising, being it for other things. So with that landscape painted, we have been traveling. Jacket's been traveling a lot. I've been traveling, to Southeast Asia. We were in the States for the Amazon conference. As I mentioned, Cantonese is built with Amazon as a partner. I think one thing that kind of unites us also as well is the sort of the scientific vertical. There's NeurIPS, for example, where global people kind of pitch in their white papers. So there's collaborations right there. So being in AI, it's been good. There's a trend in AI, not just as a buzzword, but actually in putting this into production. Companies are using it. So there's money from companies to experiment. So in general, it's been good. But obviously, like you have the macro headwinds, you have things that are popping up. JD Vance was out from Paris, and you have one group that wants to regulate intelligence, and you have the other part which doesn't want to regulate intelligence. And how do you regulate intelligence? Does it stifle innovation? So, like Jackie was mentioned before, Hong Kong is having a lot of discussions. Globally, you're also having a lot of discussions, and that's going to affect us somehow. So, exciting times, positive, net positive, exciting. And yeah, so I'm not sure if Jackie wants to add to that.
And for Jackie, I mean, I don't know you that well, but I assume you grew up in Hong Kong, and maybe you could talk about how, what it's like to kind of go through this kind of path and what that's been like, ending up in like a super hackathon mode and meeting Pac.
For me, when we talk to like why we go to the university and to study computer science, right? Actually, we all like have some dreams, right? Could be building our own game. I did that. Could be doing our startup. But at that time, it would be like Bill Gates building the Microsoft. So that's why I'm working on my startup, right? And then the third thing is about the holy grail of the artificial intelligence. So actually, the holy grail we talk about is not just we call artificial intelligence, but we call it artificial general intelligence, AGI in short. So that's what we want to do, but it's super difficult. When I was still studying in the university, we only have machine learning. Our neural network can only have 3 layers, not the fourth one, because we can always reduce back to 3 layers, right? The input layer, the processing layer, the output layer. So we can't do something even like deep learning by that time. And so we don't know how many hard problems we have. And then that's something like I really want to do AI. When I was in university, I was doing my major in computer science, minor in philosophy, and then I also sit in like other courses in psychology or could be linguistics, right? And then I will go to the libraries and then read those kind of cognitive science, neuroscience, brain science books. I'm fascinated by all these, but I'm not confident enough to go into the AI field. And then after the years of development of AI with deep learning, generative AI thing, and especially ChatGPT getting super hot. I remember 2 years ago, all our clients like every day calling me and they say, "Hey Jackie, I know you're working on ChatGPT." And then I said no. And the truth is I really did not do that. I was still working on the micro research thing, social listening thing. And then they said, "No, Jackie, listen to me. You are working on ChatGPT." And then I said, okay. I know they have this kind of demands, right? But then like every day I got tens of calls like this. I told the whole team, like I've never seen such a list like this. So this should be a historical moment. We should all in to this. And that's why we started to do this. And given that you see we do Cantonese LM because we are in Hong Kong, etc. But actually AI, I think, is something global. Like for investor, they will not like say, hey, because you're doing Cantonese, this is something regional, very interesting. And so they invest. For investors, their money is global. They can go everywhere, right? For AI, for users, it's everywhere. Hong Kong is a small market. I've been looking through all the successful startups in Hong Kong. Actually, they all target globally. And so, like for Cantonese, it's not that easy. But this is our first step. And then once we have done it, I think low resource languages is a really good spot. It's not just because of AI or LM. It's by the history of AI. You can always see that things that could be starting from United States and then so things in English and then following by China. So we have simplified Chinese and then you can see Europe, French, Japan, starting to Southeast Asia, Middle East, and then Africa, right? You can always see the steps, right? But then like it's not equal. So on the internet, you can see most could be in English, but not other languages. So that's the inequality and also the imbalance. And so what I'm thinking right now, for technology wise, we know that technology is language agnostic, which means technology actually doesn't differentiate like whether it's English or Chinese or Cantonese. It doesn't differentiate. It just learn all the human languages. Right. So why don't we just help all languages to build such kind of technologies like LM for all the languages? Why we need to do this step by step? Of course, there are some practical reasons because if we need to support low resource languages, actually from commercial settings, the return on investment is super low. Like even for the big corporations, they can do that. And that's why I will go back to communities that are passionate to their own languages and to preserve their own cultures. And so that would be a very good start. It's not actually about money, it's about passion. And then so that we can break this kind of inequality and also imbalance.
Right. This is like a proving grounds, is what you're saying. And then I assume Thai is a low resource language and Bahasa is considered a low resource language. Even Japanese and French are considered low resource languages, or is it really only like English, Mandarin, Spanish are like the high resource languages? Or
right.
that could be a huge market. That could be essentially a huge market. Is that right? Or that's what you're saying?
Yeah,
that is a huge market.
it's just like it's a very huge market. It's just like the long tail when Amazon do the e-commerce thing, right? They selling books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are over 6,000 human languages in the world. We can actually only consider like maybe the top 10 or maybe top 15 high resource languages. Even for Cantonese, it's actually a top 20 language, but it's still low resource language already. So you can see like English is super predominant and then it's Spanish and then even for Chinese is like ranked to 12 already. If you talk about the number of people speaking, yes, like for Mandarin is like the top 1 or 2. But then when we talk about the data that we can use for computation, for training, it's not even in top 10. That's the gap. And that's why I would say low resource languages is a huge market, but very low ROI. And so nobody wants to do that. But for equality, we should do that. If you just do English or Chinese, actually you can nearly cover the whole world. They will not even care to support.
Right. So I mean the social implications basically basically is what you're saying. It's just like, just the way things are going, it could just end up being those two languages. And then if there isn't something like this that exists, then that's probably why, in the States, they have immersion schools for Mandarin. The same here. And I'm sure everyone here has been learning English for a while. So Pac was a banker, correct? Or
Yep,
hedge fund? Super
a banker.
capitalist? You said you were a super capitalist. We didn't know each other before, but I remember you had heard of a movie. But I know now you've transitioned into this tech startup entrepreneurial world. You've mentioned and grumbled about some of the challenges. What has the transition been like for you?
From banking into entrepreneurship, the first 1 month was full of optimism, a lot of positive energy, but it starts to quickly dwindle, probably more than 1 month. I think the hardest thing has been really on just adoption and funding. And I think that's kind of unique to Hong Kong. Some people say it's unique to Japan as well, too. Hong Kong, you have a very captive market, 7 million people. Risk capital into this sort of category of, startups and seed and all that kind of stuff isn't really there, in my opinion, at least sort of what I've gone through. In that sense, you don't have like Silicon Valley, where you have a really good idea, they'll give you 10 million US dollars, right? And they almost expect you to kind of lose it all. If you don't lose it, at least you'll hopefully give them 100, 500x or whatnot. Hong Kong, you don't really have that. Hong Kong, I think they're still more into equities, public equities, real estate, and so on and so forth. The past few years has started to change, but I would say that would be the number one challenge. Number two challenge is really adoption, right? So when we're doing sort of market research and social listening, it wasn't really highly adopted. And so you have to kind of really push just to make the needle move a little bit. Generative AI has been a bigger push globally. So I think that has been on our side. So we work with institutions like Cyberport that has helped us, connect with all sorts of stakeholders. But, just to kind of name number two, that would be number two, adoption. Number three, I think, is just, again, Hong Kong so small, you have talent issues as well. So you have all the things that kind of come up that makes a startup, successful. So I think we've kind of been through that. And so we should be able to solve some of the problems. But I think that would be the biggest difficulties in transitioning from cushy job to sort of the matrix to outside the matrix.
You are the one. You're Lawrence Fishburne's character, right? And you're Neo. Shaggy. I mean, DeepSeek has certainly just been a couple of weeks and I've talked to a few people and that apparently had come out of nowhere as well and unexpected. And I certainly could see you guys doing the same. What's your opinion of DeepSeek coming out and has that changed things for you guys as well? Has that helped improve or has it made things harder for you or what do you guys think?
It's not new to us. I think it's been positive in some sense, at least from what I do at Voti, which is to meet, people outside of Hong Kong and they're like, hey, look, we shouldn't have snubbed Hong Kong or Greater China in that instance. So they've kind of opened up again, being interested again in startups in Hong Kong. So I think there's been a lot of positivity, but on the technical side, obviously Jackie can comment. But yeah, in general, it's been positive. Definitely not a lot more discussions around that, and more companies were willing more to take a stab into generative AI. So positive for me on my side.
Yeah, I heard from my other friends that like even they go to the markets, the cafes, everybody is talking about like DeepSeek. DeepSeek is suddenly getting super hot in 2025. The phenomenon is back in 2023, like everybody is talking about ChatGPT, right? It's like they need something, they need a talking point, some topic to talk about. From our perspective, I would say, yeah, as Pat said, nothing new because we know DeepSeek like starting from V1, right? And to us, it's a very good optimization. They have done it very well. To me, I would say like for AI field, there is no barrier actually. Like Google internally, they have this kind of internal report very early. There is no barrier. And so the only barrier is to be quick. You need to build something very quickly. Even from investors' point of view, it's very difficult. Like if they invest to build LM, and then once you have burned millions of dollars building LM, and then the next week, another big corporations, they have a better LM, and then with better benchmarking, right? Your investment is not even having the returns, and then like, okay, build it, and then better one, and then you get the headlines, and then, okay, it's stopped. So it's not something investable, actually. Some may think that AI has barrier because if you need to build such kind of LM, you need lots of GPUs, you need lots of chips, right? That's very expensive. And then you may even need lots of energy to run that. Kind of true, But then we can also see that throughout just these 2 years, we are finding smarter ways, more energy efficient way to build an even better model, right? Even smaller model, but more intelligent, right? So is it really like we need that kind of computation? DeepSeek is actually telling you it's not. Actually, it's something we know, but we just don't want to like poke someone. There are a lot of big corporations, they have some stories telling, but from insider point of view, some may not hold true actually. It's very tough for us to like speak publicly about this, but we know what is happening, so we position well. And that's why even as I said, AI has no barrier. We still can find our sweet spot that we can survive in Hong Kong, even we can outstanding and then being present globally. I think that's how we position ourselves and also how we see the current AI market.
You know, even if you got something good, doesn't necessarily mean it'll go to market, just because part of it's survival, essentially, too. Let me jump to, what do you guys think about Grok 3? And tell me what, your initial reaction is. Anything you want to comment on that?
I want to make this interview more relevant, like after 2 years. So like when ChatGPT is super hot, we would not have heard of like Grok, DeepSeek, Gemini, right? So right now it seems that DeepSeek, Grok is super hot, and then maybe the next week people forget everything, and there's something new coming out. But what I want to capture here is that from the original language model to large language model, we can see the capture of language understanding. And then it is also possible to be creative, but it may hallucinate. That's the problem. So right now, with those newer models, you can see that it's going from actually large language model to large reasoning models. So why reasoning is actually using more computation power to do the like internal thinking process. Like everybody, if you think, actually you are talking to yourself, right? The original LM, it doesn't talk to itself. It's just like, if we refer to the book Thinking Fast and Slow, we are just like the system one. We just like have the instance response. And so it may hallucinate. But if let's say we go to the system two, we actually have the planning capability. We have the reasoning capability. And so right now for the large reasoning model, I would say this would be definitely the trend. And this is a very good trend, because once we have the reasoning process, we can actually capture what Express is thinking. And then we can actually transfer the experiences and also know-hows from Express to the AI. And that means AI would not hallucinate in the previous way, and it can also perform Express tasks. And that means AI can really go into the commercialization process, tap into our usual working pipelines. And that's something I would say having a great impact, because otherwise that will go back to what I mentioned, like LM doesn't have ROI, why I need to do the investment, right? But for large reasoning model, for Express, building all those agents and then put into their working pipelines, that's something we can have ROI. And so this is a practical thing. And also I would like to add one more thing, is that like for DeepSeek, for Grok 3 is super new, right? But they're also announcing Grok 2, they're going to do the open source thing. What I want to talk about is that OpenAI is not open and it is not accessible for everyone. This is something not good for the whole human civilization. So what we are believing right now is that we should do open source AI, which is proposed by Mozilla Foundation. Like if OpenAI, they claim to be open, but then they can suddenly, because of somebody, they make another decision, they can just make it proprietary, closed source, and then you can't access it anymore, right? In order to make it transparent, accessible for everyone, actually to me, it's open source, open data, and then open ways, open the models. It's something we need to do. So DeepSeek is doing this. For Grok 2, they are going to do open source it. So I think this will be beneficial to the whole ecosystem.
Let me outline three main points. One is, I think, defining hallucination. What is hallucination in terms of AI, and what does that ultimately mean for you? And then I think I was gleaning from what you're saying is that ultimately, is the AI listening? Is that what you're saying? And then the third point and question is, basically Elon says OpenAI is not open. That's kind of been a big topic. And sort of, are you saying that his actions kind of show that actually he is being open about it and everyone else is, but OpenAI is kind of like, hey, let's be careful. This is what you're saying, by the way. This is not a statement by me. I'm just the objective person, but I'm just kind of summarizing what you think, which is the topic of the show. I just want to kind of get a sense of that. So why don't we take the first one on as quick as possible? What does it mean for a computer to hallucinate?
Yes, let's do it one by one. I think right now AI, the large language model, kind of really capture how the brain functions. I would say so. So what hallucination actually means to me is just like we would dream and we can be creative. We can speak gibberish, speak nonsense. It's just like that. But of course, like in technical terms, they was because the large language model is just a self-contained model, so it doesn't know what's the external world, how the outside world is. So it can do the fact checking. That will trigger some very difficult topic like what fact means. It's very difficult. Yeah.
And so it can make hypotheses too. That could also fall into hallucination as well. And you'd be like, whoa, maybe the world is all purple and green or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because some may just think like as long as it's not related to the truth, right? Then they think it's hallucinating. But actually it's a very tricky way to define hallucination.
Hallucination doesn't necessarily have to have a negative connotation either. It can actually be a positive thing if it comes up with something extraordinary that's just different.
Well, if you need the AI to do dreaming, right, to create some new images, they need to hallucinate. So hallucination is a function.
Okay. So the second question you were talking about is like really the AI getting to the heart of what someone else is saying, regardless of what language it is. The language is sort of, it doesn't really differentiate. It's just absorbs and then tries to do what I'm doing, basically. It's like understand what you're saying. And that's how we're communicating. Is that what you're saying?
If you talk about the trend, yeah, we can do some prediction. Like we have the large language model. Right now we have the large reasoning model. We can build the agents. And then you can also see we will start to have the speech-to-speech model. So you can talk to the model directly and the model will just reply you by speeches. So that's something we can do next. And then from research community, like from Professor Feifei Li, you can see they are working on spatial intelligence. Right now, all the models we have doesn't really understand the external world. If you ask the model, if you want to go from one place to another, actually it can't do the planning properly, right? Because it doesn't have the spatial knowledge about that. So Feifei is fixing about that. And then after that, we can make sure the model, just like DeepSeek, optimize it, make it smaller, but still more intelligent. And then we can put it into robots so that we can have embodied large multimodal model so that actually the robot just act like a human being. And that can go back to answering my wife's question. Yes, they can handle chores.
What I'm doing right now is the appropriate answer for anybody out there. So the third one is Elon. Well, everyone's quite divided, but it seems to me that maybe in my discussions, the lean is towards like Elon is having a positive impact and sort of his actions are kind of reflecting of that. That does not take away from sort of his political actions or anything like that, but just generally that's the sense I get. Is that the case here? And is that what you're saying?
I would say what Elon Musk he comment about OpenAI, I would say it's true, right? OpenAI is not open, it's not accessible for everyone. So why it's called OpenAI? It should be called closed AI, right? It's true. I would say lots of the facts Elon Musk mentioned are true, but Elon Musk has his own agenda for his benefits, not just for always talking about helping all the human beings, all civilization, which I don't believe. I'm so sorry. Yeah, but what he mentioned, for the particular statements, they are true. I appreciate what he's doing, great stuff, all are epic things. But I believe he has his own agenda.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in his arena, in the tech arena, I mean, some of the things that he's calling out is beneficial to the entire community. Maybe not in the other arenas. Well, okay, so maybe you guys could give a bold prediction about where things are going and what you think about AI.
I think the bold prediction of AI is that investments, I think last year was $300 billion. So I think from an investment standpoint of view, we're going to probably see that go to maybe even 500 billion or maybe even more than that. And that's a reflection of adoption, right? So a lot more people having access to cheaper models, to having it kind of be part of our lives. I think we're also in a very pivotal moment in terms of regulations. And I think once that gets stamped out, out, we'll see even more money kind of coming into it because things are more clear. Can you use copyright data to train on a model or can you not? It's something going to be much more widely adopted. We're not going to go through any AI winters, at least for upcoming next 12 to 24 months. In terms of big things, I guess, concerns and positives, I think it's a net positive thing. We'll definitely have more concerns about deepfake. I think that's going to be a big thing. I think we're going to solve things like the Moravec's paradox, right? Like Jackie was saying, you can make AI do really intelligent things, but when you ask it to do dumb things like pick up a cup or, wash dishes, it might not be able to do that. But I think not this year, but, that's definitely going to be something in the future as well, too. Those are just sort of some few one-liners, Jackie.
Yeah, sure. First, I would think burning so much energy, using so many computation power to do that would not be the trend. We need to do it in a smarter way. So one thing, we are all going to the Holy Grail to AGI. One super very important thing is something we call grokking. So it's not grok by XAI, it's about grokking. Grokking is like a process right now for large language model, whether it is just memorizing data we feed in, or does it really understand and generalize and then can handle some tasks in a resilient way. So that kind of process, how we train the model to that state, we call it grokking. So that's something like an open problem. Scientists are trying to find how to do that. If we know how to do the grokking, we can induce the grokking to make sure we can use fewer data, less computation power to train a more intelligent model. So I think that's something first. And then models can be intelligent, but it's not conscious. So that's already to the state, we can put the model to the robots. It just looks like human being, but it's not conscious. It may still have the agent model. It can observe the environments and take appropriate actions, but it will not be conscious, self-conscious. And we have artificial intelligence, but it doesn't mean we have artificial consciousness. And consciousness is the hard problem of science. We don't know how consciousness comes from. And that will trigger something we could be calling quantum AI. So, Google is actually have some very fundamental research on quantum AI, QAI in short. So that could be something over 20 years. We can't guess easily because we don't know how many technical challenges in between. But I can see generative AI is only the start.
Great. Well, hey, so I have a bonus question.
Okay.
Obviously we're in Hong Kong. So one of the things I realized when I first moved here is that when people have discussions, it's very open versus in the States, you kind of have to watch what you say. So I know when we're talking about our wives and can the AI do cooking and cleaning, it's a cultural thing for Hong Kong to be very practical, right? Like artificial intelligence, what is really the practical application? I am curious though, in terms of determining intelligence, let's just say, for example, that intelligence is binary and it's male and female. Are there things that you guys or people in artificial intelligence exploring in terms of sort of decision making? Is there currently a difference in that kind of logic and reasoning? For example, I'll notice when my wife and I will interview somebody for a job, let's say, she'll pick up on things that I didn't necessarily get that, right? And I think thank goodness you were there because I didn't see it that way. Are there ways to differentiate that? What do you guys think?
Maybe I'll quickly go first because I don't really have a really good answer. But besides speech recognition, we can do a female voice and male voice. In the medical side, by putting an X-ray or MRI, you can actually see if this is a female or male. So I think obviously, there's ways to differentiate for reasoning. I know it's a very good question. That goes back to my first response, which is I don't have a good answer for that. Jackie?
Sure. This is a very good question with lots of implications, actually. Right now, I would say, for large language model, because it's system one model, so it just hallucinates, right? Being creative, and so it doesn't have gender. For large reasoning model, is super rational, so it could be something more like a guy. If you need to make the model more female, actually, we need to introduce emotion system. So we actually, in AI field, we have something called emotional machine to make a machine emotional. But why we need emotion? Because we need super quick response, which is actually for survival. But then for AI, why does it need to handle survival issue? If we introduce that, the implication is that they may fight for their survival and then with a direct conflict to human beings. That's something have a very deep and great implication. And so I think right now when I do all these prediction, I didn't really include emotions in. We can mimic that, but it doesn't have emotion because it has some deep down underlying implication. I would say like if you use ChatGPT and then you ask some questions, like in China, we always like to ask this question. If your mom and your girlfriend all drop into the sea, they are drowning, who are you going to save? Yeah, of course we can use LM, we can use the reasoning model to try to answer that. My answer is that I don't know how to swim.
But my answer is never ask that question, like, who are you going to save to anybody? Because just don't ask that question. Let's not talk about it. That would be like a lot better. Okay, well, thank you, Pac. Thank you, Jackie, for being on my show. And it's great to chat with you about artificial intelligence. I look forward to more developments. And yeah, hope more people will listen in and subscribe.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.